I'm Peter Shukie. I work, well, I won't say where I work because it's kind of not relevant, although I do work in a college. I've been involved in education for a long time, and the reason I'm here talking to you, Martin, now is our discussion about COOCS and about free education. So that's what I would like to give a bit of background to. And COOCS is community open online courses, and I make no I'm in no way ashamed of saying that. I took that initially from MOOCs, and I did a MOOC in 2011, Change 11 it was called, and I remember being on there and thinking there's some exciting stuff in here, there's a lot of discussion, there's a lot of things going on that are different than working in a higher education and a further education setting. It seems freer. But then after a little while I started to think, well, it's kind of freer, it's kind of free, but everybody here is like a doctor or a professor or an industry leader or a university grandee, and I feel a little bit now that the conversation is dominated by them, just the same as it would be if I was actually in the university or I was in college. Well, this isn't a criticism of MOOCs because I think they've got a lot of CMOOCs, particularly the connectivist approach, particularly. But what I thought is, there's no point us having this discussion here where we're saying that this is emancipatory and empowering and freedom and in bringing all new people in, because it wasn't. It was the same people. It was those people that were driven to talk about education. They were probably already doing it via email and forums and other things anyway, but this massiveness sort of started to add an extra element to it. And I could be involved, for instance, who was at the periphery. But behind me, or beyond me, and in the community, there were people who didn't know this was going on. And even if they did, and I know this because I had students that I asked to get involved with me, they were terrified by it. It was not welcoming, it was not friendly. And also, it still prioritised the same things. It prioritised knowledge of a canon. So even though we were talking about getting rid of the canon, the people who were talking about getting rid of the canon were making links back to these classical metaphors of where education came from and what it meant, and educare and educare, and the whole concept of education being this, and we can challenge this. We can challenge it, but if we use the same tools and we use the same language, we're going to exclude the same people and include the same people. So COOCS was a kind of garbled conversation that was running with lots of different people at lots of times about how can you do it so that those people that don't get involved in education really realise that actually they should be doing something more of this. And I don't mean should mandatory and compulsory, like mandatory staff development or mandatory voting and all the arguments that go with those. I mean that there's a sense of confidence that you get from sharing and being appreciated for knowing things. And in life, if you look back at life, we've just had a little brief chat before this about the Rhizomatic ideal, and I think that's so strong in there. I don't say it's an ideal, the Rhizomatic concept that learning can happen anywhere, anytime. And the CMOOC, the connectivist MOOC, seem to tap into that a little bit, but with the caveat that I've said that it doesn't include that many. But what the Rhizomatic indicates is that your learning, my learning, and we all know this if we're honest with ourselves, that our learning, the most significant learning, never happens in classrooms. It happens in a discussion with somebody that you'd never expected to learn that thing from. It might be another student, it might be somebody who knew nothing about it but gives you a completely different angle. It might be somebody on a bus who says something that doesn't even say something to you. You overhear a conversation, you watch some. Learning happens all over the place, anywhere, everywhere, all the time. But it's all lost if we just concentrate on that learning that's commodified, turned into courses, has a registered expert who's in a position to tell you. And if we say to people, no, just say what you think about something, show your experiences. And that might be anything from I always used initially for this, beekeeping. Like, there's a guy in the local area where I live who's about 80 now. And he runs courses for beekeeping, but he's very old, very frail, and he only do one a year for 3 or 4 people. And I know somebody here who wanted to do it, should never get a place, and he cancelled. But why doesn't he make something that's a shared thing, or you eventually find somebody who's worked with him and get that course and then share it with everybody all the time so his knowledge isn't lost. And that did happen, but they never made a COOC out of it. They just created their own little group and they meet in a pub in Blackburn. But that's great, because it doesn't matter where you do it as long as you start to think in different ways. That learning is not something outside you, beyond you, in a big building with a name on it that says education or university or college or school. Education, learning, sharing can happen anywhere. And it's just about engaging people with those ideas a little bit more, so they start to feel that they have something to give. And I suppose a little bit that comes from the CMOOC idea. And it's so true of the XMOOC, where expert-driven star lecturers, that's where it's gone. And there's always a danger of that, because when you put massive in front of something, the hedge funds and all the other people who started to back Udacities and Coursera's and all those ideas, where they were so much of a free market principle. Look, masses of people are doing this. There must be $1 off each one of those. How much will that make? So that attracted. What was lost then was look at all these people sharing and learning. What does that tell us about the world in which we live? Let's go and explore people's natural innate capacity and desire to learn something and to develop. And if we can capture that, anything can happen then. And so COOCS is a kind of cack-handed, scruffy, not resourced at all, put together idea to try and give people the space to begin that discussion, to have a play with things, and to do it on their own terms. So there is no preferred ideal. There isn't a course that is a perfect course, and there isn't a way of teaching. It could be somebody just like we're doing now, having a conversation via Google Hangouts. Brilliant. So we've used that for something. Somebody else might not feel comfortable with that, and they want to draft something up in written form. Somebody else use photographs. Somebody else might, I don't know, have a group discussion that they film or record and they put there. And or a forum where people just share ideas, and these things are happening everywhere. I'm not saying that COOCS is offering anything new, but it's just trying to bring other people in who might not have been involved with that and saying it could be you too. It gives you a chance to promote that thing, that idea of learning. So that's basically it, Martin. And so what it is a website where people can go on and create courses, but the ethos of it, I think, is as important as the actual product thing of it. And that small community that lasts, and it's so transient, and it's just moments of beauty, moments of recognition, that they're sort of lost if somebody always has to end it with, oh, you should be on the X Factor, or you need a contract, and we chase people towards industry and towards massiveness, when sometimes it's about just appreciating that small, sometimes there's a nuanced way of being. A lot of the time there's a nuanced way of being that we can just celebrate that in itself, and there's a difference then, to having to make everything huge, to make everything like a monolithic success. You can have small and continued.
Well, yeah, I've mentioned, I did a talk a couple of weeks ago, Interop, and I was talking about, again, the network. It was, the network is our computer, and it was about distributed kind of operations, really. And, and if you're on a desert island, you could come up with the theory of relativity, but nobody would know. And there's an example of the stone axe. It took, paleontologists think it took 2 million years to evolve the stone axe. But one theory is that it evolved in many different places, but because humanity was isolated, and tribes would die out, it never spread. So there was never enough stone axes to find. But it was what you were saying there, that great ideas would emerge in isolation and never get spread. You were talking about the beekeeper, just like that. Some technique he might have, that it's some little trick he's got that nobody else would know about it, or that little group in the pub, they might. But yeah, if he could share it, this is the beauty of our age at the moment, isn't it? Of put it on YouTube or blog it, and it could go viral and it could become, you know, major.
Yeah,
That's
yeah. But even with something being shared, it's everywhere it goes. We're back to deconstruction now, but everywhere it goes, it's going to be interpreted in slightly different ways. So the people who totally disagree with 90% of what the black bear beekeeper says, there might be one little thing that they then alter in their practice, but then they share that and the reasons they disagree with the others, and then you've got this new way of looking at beekeeping rather than a new ideal beekeeper. You know, there is no ideal beekeeper, and we can allow that to proliferate and go. But
yeah.
the thing that we're using now, and the idea of Google and Apple, I mean, because we've talked about the worries a little bit of corporate dominance and like expert and single ways of looking. But actually, there's a lot of beauty in what they recognise, in that people will shape how things are used because they don't want 20 users, they want millions, billions of users. So because of that, people have to shape how it works. And that is so different to the institutional sectors that try and incorporate them, because they're continually trying to fix and say, right, which bits can we wall off for ourselves? Yes, Twitter's brilliant, so how can we monitor Twitter? Well, you can't, not really. I mean, obviously there's lots of pieces of software that allow you to do it in some way and to monitor and to propagate your tweets. But that's kind of beside the point. You know, you build your own communities that way. And that it becomes greater than how you learn. I started it off with what is COOCS in my mind. It was a question about what is learning, what do we mean by it? And I still don't, there's no answer to that for me. I don't think it exists of what it is. It's as different as we all are. But there's a sense where we're continually encouraged to see learning as being the things that do come from the institution. So qualifications are learning, and without them, people are encouraged to see themselves as less worthy. You know, there's so many shows on TV and in the radio, you hear it, and in the press about low qualification rates and low wage and low aspiration, and the three are always hung together, you know, as if qualifications are root out of all this. But learning itself is kind of that's irrelevant. The qualifications,
yeah.
You know? And it's about really reclaiming that. And so all the discussion we're having about the free learning, I think it's as ancient as ever. It was like where the barbarians to the Greeks, perhaps, but the barbarians were doing just as much as the Greeks. They just didn't have they didn't have the means of propagating it for eternity, did they? You know, outside we learn as much wherever we are. But then you start to see that who teaches you is a very wide open thing. And if we say the word teacher, and I know this because of the job I do now, but also from my own experiences, there's an image that comes up in people's minds when you say teacher.
Yes.
For some it's positive and for some it's negative. But it is that person in a classroom in the main. It's, you know, it takes a certain depth of reflection and an encouragement to reflect that way, to see teachers as being all those people in your life, you know, that have taught you things. And I suppose that's where COOCS would go. I'll go back to that thing with the MOOCs, though. The connectivist MOOCs promise that, and I think there's a lot of that there. You know, the potential is there and the discussion's there, but the people in it still seem to be the people from education.